Hungary is totally out of that. I think it's a bad decision. All the others, except the Czechs and Slovaks, think that it was a good decision. I think it was an extremely bad decision, which brings Europe closer to the war. It looks like a loan, but of course the Ukrainians will never be able to pay it back.
NATO member Hungary has lashed out at the European Union's hefty $105 billion loan plan for Ukraine, calling it risky and politically reckless. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is often described as a Putin ally, claimed Ukraine will not be able to repay such a massive loan burden. Orban labeled the package a bad decision and warned that it could drag Europe closer to war by deepening the bloc's direct stake in the conflict. He also stressed that Hungary will not back the EU's billion-dollar loan for Ukraine, signaling he is prepared to resist the plan inside European forums.
So there was a deal for these 90 billion to Ukraine, but Hungary is participating, is contributing or not?
No, Hungary is totally out of that. I think it's a bad decision. All the others, except the Czechs and Slovaks, think that it was a good decision. I think it was an extremely bad decision, which brings Europe closer to the war. It looks like a loan, but of course the Ukrainians will never be able to pay it back. So it's a lost money. And those who are behind that loan will take the responsibility and the financial consequences of that. 3 countries decided not to be part of it. That's an opt-out for Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary. So we are innocent.
However, EU leaders reportedly failed to agree on a separate plan to use Russian assets to fund Ukraine, highlighting deep divisions within the bloc. Orban said the EU dropped the idea because of fears that Moscow could respond by targeting or seizing Europeans' private assets in Russia. He argued that private EU-owned assets still inside Russia are larger than the frozen Russian holdings in Europe, making retaliation a serious concern. Hungary also claimed Europe could end up paying twice as much if Russian assets were used, suggesting the financial blowback could outweigh any benefit.
Background negotiations took place, all of which were about whether the frozen Russian assets could be taken from Russia and given to Ukraine. And by the evening, it became clear that this was a dead idea. But the originators did not give up. Instead, they fought, saying that they would somehow create a viable version of it. But at 9 o'clock during the negotiations, it became clear that there are insurmountable difficulties, so it is not a matter of intellectual laziness or lack of knowledge, but simply that there are some risks that cannot be undertaken. You see, we initially rejected this, so we did not participate, because we stated that Hungary opposes this and will not take any responsibility for it. But even for those who wanted to participate, many important things became apparent along the way. The first, that overall, the EU member states and private companies have more assets in Russia than these frozen assets here. Therefore, if the Russians respond by also seizing the assets coming to them, then overall, Europe does not win, but loses. It has also emerged that legally, the arrangement cannot be defended, it will be classified as confiscation, and there is at least a risk, an almost certain consequence, a risk there is if the Russians pursue their claim legally, meaning they demand this amount back through legal means. And if they do demand it back, and we have meantime given it to the Ukrainians, then someone has to give that money back. And if the Belgians did not agree to this, they said they would only contribute if the member states covered this risk. Meaning they would step in if a problem occurred. But no one was really eager to do this, and it turned out that in such cases, generally, it's not just the amount you took that's lost, but it could easily be twice that. And then a debate arose about whether, if there is any liability, it is capped or uncapped. That is, whether there is some upper limit or not. It turned out that we are full of legal and practical problems that simply cannot be solved, so I think this is a dead issue. Despite the battles over repayment, the use of the Russian frozen assets is a dead idea. Moreover, it's good that it didn't materialize, because I think it would have immediately dragged us into a war.
Apart from Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic have said they will not provide guarantees for the EU loan, adding more uncertainty to the funding structure. European officials have argued that Kyiv can repay the loan if Russia is later forced to pay reparations after a peace deal, though that outcome remains far from certain.